Okay, well, everyone, welcome to the discussion of ISIS Papers, Chapter 6. Oh, wow. Does anyone have anything they want to start off by sharing?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Okay. So I wanted to start off the chapter by first defining the purpose of the human brain, because I feel like that has a lot to do with these three chapters. So Dr. Cress defines the human brain. Well, the purpose of the human brain is to decode and solve problems in an external environment, both physical and social aspects. And thus, specific patterns of behavior may be looked at or looked upon as functional or dysfunctional solutions to the problem posed by their external environment. So just to give a brief explanation, this basically means that the brain's sole purpose is to solve problems that it observes through the environment, through its external environment, through its sensory. So if you're thinking like a white man and you were looking around and you see a bunch of melanated people, this chapter 6 and 7 and 8 is the mind frame of the brain trying to solve this problem that it has now identified or realized.
Wow.
Yeah. So we can take it from there. Let's go, y'all.
Yeah. So is it safe to call like the brain computer like the tool, the most essential tool, of course, for solving problems, right?
Yes, that's its main function. Our brain's main function is to solve problems. So if you're thinking like a white man, he sees us as a threat and a problem. Chapter 6, 7, and 8 is his attempt to solve this problem.
All right, damn. Yeah.
Well, white supremacy racism is the attempt to solve the problem, but since we're going to get specifically in these chapters, that's kind of like their thought process.
So yeah, I've read these chapters twice, and I never saw it as like a trilogy in such an amazing, short, concise way of explaining like what it is. It is an attempt to solve a problem, and the answer to their problem is genocide. And I would like to read this part. I always like to get centered in the chapters, and I think the first paragraph is just so important. It's on page 81. And chapter 6, the politics behind Black male passivity, effemination, bisexuality, and homosexuality. Black male passivity, effeminization, bisexuality, and homosexuality are being encountered increasingly by Black psychiatrists working with Black patient populations. These issues are being presented by family members, personal workers, and schools, and many other social institutions, or by Black men themselves. Many Black men in the population are reaching the conclusion that such issues have become a problem of epidemic proportions amongst Black people in the U.S. Although it was an almost non-existent behavior phenomenon amongst indigenous Blacks in Africa. I think it's really interesting that she starts off by, concisely writing about a pandemic and a global issue that is causing the depopulation and the continuance of genocide of Black people using other forms of violence, in my opinion. Anyone have any thoughts? How did you guys feel when you read that passage? I would love to hear more. Now we can just move on to other things you want to share.
Yeah, I highlighted.
Sorry, Joe, that was an accident.
Yeah, I highlighted the last sentence of the paragraph. Although it was almost a non-existent behavioral phenomenon amongst indigenous Blacks in Africa. I can totally see that being like, a reality. I definitely am aware that like you know, spirits. I'm definitely aware that like homosexuality and that kind of behavior existed in like ancient Africa, but not in the context in which it exists now at all. It's been like totally used against Black people in such a way that is divisionary. Yeah, divisionary of like Black people and also like destructive of like Black identity.
Mhm.
So I think it's really important that she's like even like brave enough to touch on this issue because it's such an incendiary topic and like
Facts.
yeah, and the system of white supremacy.
Yeah, this chapter kind of blew my mind in terms of thinking how sexuality can even be used and weaponized against people. So I had to do a bit of extra research and look into a lot of stuff, especially culturally. And then I came to the understanding that, yeah, she's not saying that homosexuality wasn't a thing, but it's definitely being kind of used, or like socially it's a behavior that is being rewarded, kind of yeah, depopularize like melanated people and kind of encourage not making more Black babies, basically. And here comes my neighbor.
I totally agree. I definitely feel like it's definitely been a tool that they've used.
Well, let me say that also.
Mary's laptop died. Yeah, so John, you can continue.
Oh, thank you. I really feel that to add to all of this is the fact that abortion is also being used in that way, and medically also with fetal tissue and experimentation. And I'm of the opinion that a woman should have her choice, but we really need to look at ourselves as Black people and the type of activity that we're engaging in with free sex, so on and so forth, and about aborting children, because it's really a part of the genocide that we're experiencing.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Can we talk a little bit more about that paragraph though, and just like the experiences that, you know, it says like these issues are being presented by family members, personnel working in schools and social institutions, or by Black men themselves. You know, I think that's also sort of like a culture shock too. There could be some confusion there. Because I mean, honestly, I haven't gotten this far in the book. I'm still kind of like in the beginning. But I mean, I still understand like this, you know, and what's being said here. I also want to ask you guys, like, knowing this information here, like, how can that translate into our current social climate, you know? Because like, I see a lot of like, I mean, I have a lot of homosexual friends, bisexual friends, polyamorous friends, and like, you know, they have their own belief systems in like their sexuality and what they, you know, what they feel comfortable with, you know what I'm saying? So how can this like this understanding or this research sort of connect to these current issues and be explained in a way that like isn't putting anyone down? Because I feel like also, I'm sorry, this is a little long-winded, but also I feel like people get sort of defensive like off the bat when you mention anything that has to do with like white supremacy having something to do with someone's personal choice.
Yeah, that's going to be a constant issue when you are telling people that their race is being genocided. They kind of have to become like a race first person in order to like even begin to do the work.
Excellent.
So like, you know, if they're not willing to become like put their race first, besides whatever their whatever else they have going on, then it's gonna be hard for them to do anything against their genocide.
Yeah.
Even if the bare minimum is like watching a video, reading. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just gonna step in. I can keep it really simple. She's wrong. It's very interesting, I think, how folks talk about just putting race first, as though all of our identities don't coalesce at the same time. I'm specifically thinking of how this happens with Black women a lot, right? And I'm thinking of like Jessica Williams, like talking about how Salma Hayek, right, was like, well, you know, who are you, right, before you're a woman, right? Like, I know you're Black, but, you know, think about being a woman first. And it was a situation where Jessica Williams like really just had to say her piece and like leave, because, right, like those two elements of identity are connected. So yeah, I think it's very interesting how the logic that Cress Welsing uses is logic of everyone around who she's talking about, but she doesn't make any direct reference to ever having done any empirical reference for the people that she is talking about.
Well, does her being a psychiatrist and doing work with children for decades give her any validity to you?
I think there are some really useful insights from that. None of those useful insights were part of the argument that she's making.
I think the argument that she's making, though, is more of like, if you just go back to even chapter 1 and just this idea of projection. This is where that's why I said it's the brain trying to solve a problem. So that's the stance that she's coming at. So if a white man is looking at us as a threat and a problem, and their thought process is because of us being a threat and a problem, their thought process is now inadequate, inferior, they're scared. You know, when your brain is in this mode of fear
or survival,
which is even worse than fear, that survival mode. And so then this is how you express yourself with your environment. And it's just basic human kind of just, because she's a psychiatrist, so it's the study of the brain and how you think and your mentality. So her whole stance, her whole argument is coming from a stance of how the brain functions and works, whether you know it or not, consciously or unconsciously. And so it goes back to this idea of projection. Because you feel this way about yourself, you are now projecting femininity and bisexuality and homosexuality, because you yourself don't even feel good about yourself enough to even want to procreate. She uses those examples. And so you're projecting. And so you have to think about the mind and what environment is the mind in? What thought process is the mind in? And that's what the basis of all her arguments. And your environment is very important. Your external environment, your sensory, is how your mind, your smell, touch, sight, hearing, this is how your mind collects this data and then calculates how it's going to respond. And this is that response. These things that we see in our environment is the response to that.
Yeah. I can I step in? I'm sorry. I wanted to agree with Salia, right? Am I saying it right?
Salia.
Sorry, I keep saying. This is the last time I got it right. I got it. I want to say that after reading like the first introduction to the book and them talk, and I guess he was talking about an artist who drew like kind of these black orbs that were stones or whatever. That was like the one thing that kind of popped up in my head as you were talking. And he didn't even know like his overall outlook. It was like a subconscious thought that, you know, he was kind of projecting this into his artwork. So like when you were talking, that really like kind of resonated with me just then. Like yeah, that's a super important thing to know, like how the brain works, because like things can happen subconsciously. Like even for me, like I subconsciously smoke weed. Like I don't even know that I'm doing it. Sometimes I'm just like doing it, you know, and sometimes I want to stop, but like, you know, I feel like I need it. So it's like a thing that like is in my mind that I think is in there, that's not a conscious, like a conscious decision. It's something that's been kind of like shown to me through my life and what I've experienced, you know. That's what I kind of like resonate with. I don't know.
Yeah, and I want to maybe ask a question to everyone, because Joe called what Francis Joe said she was making an argument, and I think she's just stating facts, and I want to read this from page 83, and she says, during the past 400 years, Black men in the U.S. have been forced into passive and cooperation. No, my bad. During the past 400 years, Black men in the U.S. have been forced into passive and cooperative submission to white men. The major strategy has been the installation of an overwhelming fear. Specific tactics range from actual physical castration and lynchings to other overt and more subtle forms of abuse, violence, and cruelty. We should not be ashamed to recognize these tactics used to oppress Black men. It is the truth, it is reality. Ultimately, this is the meaning of Black oppression. So in order for us to be oppressed, we have to be made an oppressed being. And an oppressed being is one that is weak. And if you really want to further decode like the LGBTQ culture, they use a lot of like they use the color pink a lot. And from that video that Celia told me that she put in the group chat, literally showed us that putting the color pink in front of a person makes their like energetic field weaker. So this is like something that the white people are definitely aware of and using against Black people to aid their genocide. So I don't think she's making like an argument. I think she's like, this is all backed by like facts and reality.
I wanted to hop in by reading.
Even the semiotics of color don't hold up on that though, because.
Hey, Joe, Joe, 1 second, Joe, 1 second. Mm-hmm. I just want to add this, because what's possible is really important. I think this right here unpacks that, and then feel free to respond right after. White men in this world area have at least a vague, perhaps unconscious understanding that after generations, 400 years, male passivity has evolved into male effeminization, bisexuality, homosexuality. These patterns of behavior are simply expressions of male self-submission to other males in the area of activity called sex. Males are also submitted to males in any other of the 8 areas of people activity: economic, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, and war. Oppression is forced submission and cooperation in any of the areas of people activity.
Okay, Joe, you wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, right, so we can absolutely, if part of what you want to bring into the conversation is how we associate different things with color, you know that is all very, very part of the context of culture. So if you want to talk about pink, right, Let's talk about how pink actually, during the time of the British Empire, was considered a masculine color, right? I think about how my grandmother's favorite color was blue, as someone who was a first generation, part of a first generation family from the Caribbean, because in the cultural context in which she was mostly brought up, that was a color for girls, right? Also, I take extreme offense at folks that actually can't speak from a place of lived experience and expertise, making all kinds of theories about folks that have a different set of realities. Like, so I'm using the word argument because something is being stated, evidence is being brought as a way to prove that the statement is correct, right? We can toss whatever word we want at it or what have you if you feel that it's fact. But what she's saying is absolutely deeply insulting because it says that Black people can't speak for themselves if they have a reality that's other than being straight, which is not true. She contradicts herself. How is it something that is connected to or that was seen, right, in ancient society, and yet mysteriously at the time when she wants to make this comment, it then becomes solely a tool of white supremacy?
I think
Idiot
though
logic.
that it was seen, but it wasn't recognized, meaning that they had homosexuality, but it wasn't the normal. It was never something that was normal. It was just like albinism. They cast them out too. So that was just the culture there. It was there, but it wasn't something that was accepted in society. The majority of society was not homosexual. The majority of the society was not albino. And when we get into the color pink, I think he was just using that as an example of how something can be used against you, like another tool. When you know things, when you have information that other people don't have, but now we do have that, you can definitely use it against someone. And I think what's more important here is that a lot of this stuff is unconsciously done. And what Dr. Cress is saying, her facts are based on observation. And this is why I'm saying this whole book is about detaching and coming to a place where you are now an observer, and you have to be able to see these things. And even the examples that she uses are white people talking about themselves. Her examples are of white people talking about themselves and in an inferior way, in regards to their genitalia and their own skin, which further proves that this is their mind and their thought process. And the way that they are expressing it is through projection. And that projection comes in the form of oppression. And those forms of oppression show up in various ways. And homosexuality just so happens to be one of them.
Yeah, and Joe, I think you may be looking at this. I think you may be looking
absolutely
at this.
wrong, and I'm really just like, I'm not. No.
Okay, well,
Joe, can I ask a question? Well, make a comment. I think, Joe, you may be looking at this from like an individual when this is like a collective like effort. This is a collective effort from whites against Blacks. You're looking at this from an individual. That's what I'm sensing. And you're also now looking at this in the context of white supremacy. Like whenever you say culture, the culture is white supremacy. We're dominated in all 9 areas by white supremacy. So a large majority of like our programming has been given to us, what we think, what we feel. But I'm not trying to negate people who are naturally born what I would call queer, what I can identify as queer, because queer is just weird, something against the so-called norm. So I'm not trying to negate that experience, but I'm just saying that experience has been taken and the white supremacists have used it in various ways against Black people.
Yeah, I'd like to give an
Go
example
ahead.
of how that's in society. Sorry, Effie, I won't be too long.
Before,
First of all,
What is that extra noise going on?
Ruby, can you
I
mute?
have no idea.
You guys got to
Thank
turn off
you.
your mics.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so Celia, when you had originally started, you mentioned the human brain, that little part that Dr. Francis Cress Welsing talks about, and I think that was a very important part to bring up, because that's exactly what white supremacy does. It analyzes and understands how our brains work and then uses it against us. So in understanding that somebody may have have a different sexuality, they have this understanding now that procreation doesn't happen that way, and it would be added on to like further, or be added on to campaigns to try and or be added on to campaigns to try and just basically assimilate their own agenda along with our own emotions. Like, okay, so in I would say I think it was in the 70s, the psychiatrists of that decade, in order to, they wanted to sell cigarettes more, and understanding that lesbians or female oppression would accumulate penis envy, which Dr. Francis Cress Welsing talks about, or can accumulate penis envy. What they did is sell cigarettes through saying this is freedoms of, let me just find out the actual name. I think it was called like liberation sticks or torches of freedom. But that is the whole understanding of the human psyche and the brain. If you understand that somebody has an agenda, by associating something else with it, they have used that to forward their agenda, which is commodifying and exploiting our fear, oppression, and our pain. And what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing is doing is, she's not basically bashing homosexuality. She's just saying how, I believe, from my understanding of the text, is that she's just explaining how it has this knowledge of understanding people's sexualities, or understanding how oppressed emotions can change your sexuality depending on like molestation, or depending on what you've experienced. They've used it against us, and then grouped their own agenda along with our struggles and the personal pains.
I was gonna say, oh, sorry, Mary, go ahead, finish.
No, that's what I'd like.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think that from the book that I read, Delectable Negro, they talk about how in Africa there were like groups that were queer, or like had gender variances, or had different types of like structures. But I think that Black people have adopted a queerness that is a white queerness under white supremacy. And it's very different, I think, from what was practiced in Africa. And I think that a lot of like, yeah, if that makes sense, like in the Delectable Negro chapter, he goes through like the different groups and how their societies were set up. And I think that it's a lot different from how like queerness is in white America today. And I think that you can say that there's people who are definitely born gay, and there's also like, you know, being gay under white supremacy, which is like a real thing, like which will affect, you know, what it means to be gay, I think.
I also think it's very important. We may read the books that touch on these topics further in the book club, but to understand that when the white people were living in the Caucasus Mountains, they were using sex as a tool of domination to dominate other men. So that behavior then transformed into them using sex in war. When they would conquer nations of other people, they wouldn't go for the woman first. They would first rape the man to traumatize them, because when that happens to a man in the context of war and white supremacy, it definitely like creates like a huge power shift, and it allows the oppressor to conquer the lands even more successfully. And this is like, white people are like the only like group of people who have like expressed and exhibited this like pattern on behavior since they've been on this planet. And this can be like traced Read that. If you don't believe me, read Iceman Inheritance, Destruction of Black Civilization.
Yeah, and there's like
Yeah.
studies that show that like it's two gay men who do this study that show that like, you know, being a black man and gay like benefits you under white supremacy in certain like scenarios because it demasculates you and it makes you seem like less of a threat to the white power structure. Like, and it's a black gay man that does this. And being a black woman too, you benefit from that because you're not seen as a physical threat. And like this is like things that have been done in society even before us, like, or like even during like World War II, this happened where like when the Germans were occupying France, they would try to get the French women on their side and kill the French men. Like it's a common thing to do to like separate as a class of people who are being subordinated, is to like get rid of the male class because that is the class that would actually have to like fight, you know, use physical strength.
Yeah, I want to just like remind everyone that the confirmation theory is simply when white people see black people, see melanated beings, they are reminded of their like deficient genetic materials, and basically this is all to preserve like whiteness and to for white people to not be depopulated by melanated people. And simply put, when they see black people, black males who are like making babies and exerting basically their perception of power and their perception of dominance, they see their annihilation because they are actually scared of being genetically annihilated by black people. It's just, to me, super extremely simple to why this is a thing that would be pushed, and also why, like what Asha said, yeah.
Yeah, to touch on what Ash said just a little, I've seen it with my own eyes. Black males just being, especially in acting, black gay males, and trainers too, trainers like for celebrities and stuff. Those black gay males they can be around those white women all day and they don't feel threatened by them because they're gay. They're given promotions. They're higher up in you know, in corporate jobs. A lot of these gay men, I've seen it with my own eyes, and it's because they're not threatening. Like straight up, they're not threatening. And the reason why they're not threatening is because they're not producing.
Yeah, you can't just like add oppressions just because you're black and you're a woman and you're gay. Like oppression is not additive, you know, it's much more complex than that. And certain spaces you benefit from being like, I know there's certain spaces where I have benefited from being a black woman who looks potentially queer or whatever. Like it just happens. Like I think that's the truth. And I think it's a lot more complicated than we like to think about it.
I think I'm hearing a lot of stereotypes,
add in a
and
comment, please.
this is not really it's not really useful. It's very interesting how Cress Welsing, like we mentioned, is in psychology. I think it's important in the American context of psychology to speak to how many times it's been used to take behaviors of Black folks and assign them a label that is considered a disease or considered a pathology. What she's doing, I think, is absolutely destructive, and really it doesn't hold water whatsoever. And it's not additive. If you want to look at the homeless crisis, a lot of the people that are in the homeless crisis would be considered folks that are Black, folks that are queer, also folks that are trans. Where is this advantage, right? Where is this advantage, save some specific items that appeal to certain stereotypes, which in and of themselves are not the entirety of the range of motion that we as Black folks have, even those of us that identify as queer. This is damaging. It doesn't hold water whatsoever.
John, you wanted to add something?
Yes. I want to touch on the comments about homosexuality in ancient Africa. Now that may have been, in the later years, some activity as such, but you will not go to ancient Kemet, which was the apex of our civilization, and find anything in the temples or in the pyramids that would let you know that this was a practice amongst the people or the learned, or however we would view them. And as far as this thing called homosexuality, look, it's really simple. Nature tells you what you should be doing with your vagina or your penis. It's just that simple. And we don't need to be clouding things because we are here in this modern time of disorder. And I really believe and practically have the information that you will not find a blackbird mating with a chi-chi. You will not find a cat mating with a dog. So we have to really just keep this thing in its proper view. And I don't mean to offend anyone because I love all of my people. And if I had the power with me, I would most definitely show you your natural environment and what you should be doing as far as sex is concerned. And as far as someone being born gay, well, there are also researches and studies proving that that's a fallacy. So I'll kick it back to you guys.
Well, it looks like we lost them.
Yeah, it's a shame that.
But thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that, John. Sorry for interrupting, Ruby.
Gotta say, it's a shame that Joel left because I don't know. I do feel like he raised a good point in terms of looking at people who are queer and displaced and kind of vilified, and where that anger and oppression comes from.
Yeah,
but then
yeah. Yeah, I wanted to comment on that, and those people aren't oppressed because they're queer. They were gonna be oppressed because they were Black, no matter what, because that's the system we're born in. And due to the way homophobia is used and homosexuality is used together against Black people, we have Black families who are inclined to, exile their homosexual children who have been programmed by white supremacy or who may have just been born that way. But this is how homosexuality and homophobia is used against us interchangeably. This is why it's so damaging, And I understand the European to be an anti-nature people, and what John said makes perfect sense to me, Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to agree with what John said, and however be it, there was, but Joe, I don't think Joel made constructive rebuttals. I think the fact that they use American psychology as a term for their knowledge and for their foundation was interesting, because the next chapter is really about how much of that is useless. And inherited a European mind that is very, very, like Spa said, anti-nature. And white Europeans, some people who classify themselves as white, have objectified nature. That's how you're able to constantly pillage and take resources, because you have objectified the land. They have objectified people. So there's no accountability or heart, empathetic heart feelings when they're torturing, murdering, killing, and eating Black people. These things, when I say eating, I mean physically, and I also mean energetically and spiritually. And we talked about that in one of our meetings about, communion, how that symbolizes the cannibalistic nature. That's all projection. I really love what Celia said, and what John said. And in a system of white supremacy, it's really hard to enjoy anything or take anything to heart, because if you're unaware of the society you live in, most of the things you're doing are going to be self-negating and not self-producing and like self-group formation in a positive way. That's what I believe, and I think the text is very valid, not because she's done extensive research, but also because she's been a psychologist for more than 40 years and has, you know, the most important data, which is talking to people and learning from actual personal experiences. You know, like there's no way to like say someone's experience is wrong. It is unfortunate that we may have you know, offended or upset our you know, melanated. We're gonna just stop and let other people talk.
No, you was making a good point. This is, if anything, he shouldn't have left. I feel like this is a perfect space for Joel to actually talk amongst us, especially when we have elders in the room who can just basically give their experience and just talk about. We can just talk about it. Just didn't have to leave. I don't see it as something to be offended. But this is the reaction that this is what the Sealy kind of programs you to do. If it affects your cognitive dissonance and you can't deal with it, rather than actually talk it through, we just ejected it based on emotions. And I just want to read what Dr. Cress Welsing had said on page 91, or at the end. All Black children should be protected by Black people from being alienated against any of their genes. By those genes of color, sexual, gender, or sickle cell anemia, racists will attempt to bring about such genetic annihilation, but Black people should be prepared to counter it. Black psychiatrists must understand that whites may condone homosexuality for themselves, but we as Blacks must see it as a strategy for destroying Black people. That must be counted. Homosexuals or bisexuals should neither be condemned nor degraded, as they did not decide that they would be so programmed in childhood. The racist system should be held responsible. Our task is to treat and prevent its continuing and increasing occurrence. I feel like she's not directly exactly saying it's only your programming that causes you to be a homosexual. I think what she's really trying to talk on is how it's used against Black people to advance their own agenda versus our own agenda of procreation and keep sustaining life.
Yeah. And I really appreciate your explanation and your by way of nature, and as understanding biomimicry, we are to mimic nature. And if you don't, on a hormone level, no one's against that, but I do truly believe that if we are to copy nature
and we live life perfectly free of oppression, then maybe these tendencies won't come up. We don't know what we hold in our DNA. We don't know what we hold. We do know what we hold in our DNA, but there's so many different variations and factors that could appeal to that. And I feel like Dr. Cress Welsing is not bashing homosexual by way of nature, but she's bashing it by way of nurture.
Absolutely, Mary. Thank you for that. That was like dead on.
Yeah, like, I don't. I wonder if Joel read the full chapter, if he got to that part.
I don't know if he read any of it, because I don't understand how he could read all this. Like, we're in chapter 6 now, and I'm confused.
I agree. It's very clear when people are resistant to information and do not read. Like when you read, whether you know what the words mean, when you read, you are literally feeding your subconscious, and that informs, and like subtly you start to transform and you reprogram yourself. And the fact that the response was so resistant to, you know, unifying and joining the critical mass of Black people who are and ready to combat and destroy racism and supremacy, I don't think that behavior is something that it's like we shouldn't even talk about it anymore. We should be talking about the book completely and fully, wholeheartedly. That's what I believe. And I would love to read something, and that, or I thought I know if I wanted to say something, I could swap, so that's why.
Oh, no, I didn't. I'm good.
Yeah. All right. So, and Shalia, you definitely left off on a good part where I think it's perfectly valid to read this part. And also, thank you so much, Mary, for like, you know, bringing more sense to the text and how Dr. Francis Cress Welsing wants to just simply free Black people and not allow us to continuously be naive, like genocided so blatantly, you know. So on page 84, however, the white male, keep in mind, like, white supremacy, I love the oppression that we feel is a projection of like white male inferiority. However, the white male arrives at his deeply repressed sense of femininity, because not only can he be dominated genetically by all Black and other men of color, but more profound from the white male perspective is the fact that he is dominated genetically by all Black and other non-white females. For the offspring of a white male and non-white female will be non-white like their mother rather than white like their white father. Thus, the offspring are genetically dominant in respect to the white male. Since this sense of genetic weakness, when compared to the majority of the world's women, propels the white male to project weakness, passivity, effemination, bisexuality, and homosexuality onto the Black male, who in his arch potential challenger. Furthermore, the white male collective structures the social environment and transfers its mental protection into a functional reality. The more the Black male strands to stand, the weaker the white male feels by comparison. And the greater the white male is stressed to feminize the Black male, to weaken the Black male's psychological potential for aggressive and assertive challenge, forcing him to remain submissive to the man. And I'll read some more. I'm on a similar page, but I want to just read that because this is not about being gay. This is about sustaining your race, because white people have created race. There's a lot of talk around white people not believing in race anymore, but that is simply a lie. White people created race and they want to win it, and winning it is, you know, genocide. It's war. Racism is war. Racism is a warfare against Black people. Yeah, and this is much more complex than what I'm saying, but I'm trying to simplify this as much as possible.
We're gonna read more.
Oh yeah, if no one has any responses.
Oh, I had something to say.
Please, yeah, I don't want to.
So to tie in chapters 4 and 5, I feel like that symbolism. I see that homosexuality can be seen. This is just me tying in the information and kind of giving my synopsis on it, so you can agree or disagree. But I'm just tying in chapters 4 and 5 on symbolism, and I think Dr. Cress touches on this too, but she may not have said it the way I'm saying it. So, homosexuality can be seen as a symbol or message being received to the brain from the external environment, expressed internally as inadequacies, and projected as a response to this realization of the external natural environment. So homosexuality is a response to the realization of genetic weakness compared to what they see out in the world.
Yeah. I think that's what
confirmation theory. Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly what she's saying. I feel. Jeez. Yeah, and yes, Aaliyah?
I was just gonna say, I feel like that's basically the entire chapter. That was just kind of like her point. And especially like what Mary said, a lot of what Mary said, that's just, it's just an observation, a scientific observation from a Black psychiatrist, from a Black perspective, from an African conscious perspective.
Yeah. And Trey, I think what you said about Joe makes sense, but I do think this is also a good space for anyone who would like to comment on that, because I think that's a good example of what happens when that's a good example of very successful white supremacist programming, I would say, when the information makes you flee, literally. So if anyone wants to, I just want to get space. I don't want people to think they can't talk about stuff in this space.
I have a perfect example of that. I mean, if you want me to share examples.
Yeah. Well, any if it wants to contextualize moment, or just moments of like successful white supremacist programming, which
yeah, I feel like I had a conversation recently with my girlfriend about the church, and Swa knows my friend Jair, and Jair talks about the church kind of like openly. He kind of has like a certain disdain about the church because of how he grew up and what he was exposed to. But talking to my girlfriend about the church and about this new information, not this new information, but putting words to information that I have now with this book, I kind of opened up the conversation to talk about Christianity and how, it's been used to kind of
kill Black people, genocide of Black people.
Yeah, basically. And immediately it was faced with resistance, and it was faced with an argument. It was faced with I was kind of bashing her belief system, and I wasn't. I was just kind of like talking to her about the facts of how we got Christianity. You know what I mean? Like how I arrived here, who wrote the book, like all that stuff. Like, these things have been programmed in us from a very earlier time in our ancestry. And I kind of wanted her to realize that. I kind of wanted her to like acknowledge that, I mean, you can have your own like belief system in the spirit, God, and however you connect with it, but just realize like where it comes from and what it's about. And I kind of felt like I was just met with resistance. And it was an interesting conversation because by the end of it, she was just like, I get what you're saying. You know what I mean? Like I understand, and here's some examples of what I understand, but I still feel like she kind of had this programming within her to say like, we shouldn't blame it all on white people, or we shouldn't, it was just like that kind of response to me just kind of felt like you don't want to denounce your, yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying she wouldn't denounce the white supremacy, but I feel like it's just going to take time for her to like mold it over and understand the information and understand where it comes from,
Yeah. It's going to take everyone. This information is not digested, and one conversation is digested over like months and years, I believe. And this is going to take a lot of knowledge building, a lot of organizing. And I want to stop saying, yeah, I see how your partner would respond in that manner. No one wants to hear that their a foundation that they build their reality upon is used to destroy their race and sustain the destruction of their race and make people of their race docile. And whether they know it or not, they're praying to a white Jesus with blonde hair and blue eyes, even if they consciously have a Black Jesus in their house. Subconsciously, it's been programmed. It's in the DNA of Jesus, basically the name Jesus. It is a blue-eyed, blonde-headed figure. And Christianity, even Constantinople said, we're going to rule with this cross. And in the book, she talks about how Constantine was able to, use Christianity to dominate and get the white collective to participate in white supremacy. And Black people are the sacrifice. And that whole religion is about Black people being sacrificed in order to sustain white supremacy. And it's not hard. It's hard to digest that. And of course, there's going to be a lot of fear. And let's just be ready for that type of information before that type of scenario to happen. And also, you really should engage in conversation about race unless you have clear intentions and you know exactly why you're talking to this person about race. And as part of the code book, there's like rules to like combating racism and white supremacy. Nearly Fuller. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna get that.
Yeah, that's the book we're reading next, so everyone should probably order that if you don't have it coming, because it takes a while.
If you guys have a list of books y'all can make, that would be awesome. I would be thankful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got you. We also have a bunch of books on reserve that we will be sending out. Oh, when we add you to the WhatsApp.
Hey y'all, not to be Frank, but can we move on to chapter 7 and 8? Because I gotta go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did anyone want to have any closing comments for chapter 6?
Just to segue peacefully and like fluidly, I just really appreciate the black male passivity chapter, and how like white male oppression and white supremacy has like made black men and other non-white men docile and happily participating in behavioral patterns that negate and lead to their own self-destruction of the future of black people. And I think it's really summed up well in this chapter. And if anyone has anything to add, please go.
Yeah, I've got something to add. I would say that I agree with that statement, especially when in page 89, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she basically lays it out that you would find that behavior with black males being more effeminate and kind of more passive, being rewarded quicker than you would find a black male who's what did she say? However, they would never provide uniforms or combat gear if customers were willing to pay $1,000 per outfit. Like if there was a militant black man, that would be frowned upon and kind of looked down upon, and he would be vilified. But if he became more passive and effeminate, then that would be something to be like rewarded. And I think that's a good point to make.
Very important.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I'm just gonna read this for my closing comments. It's on page 89. One ex-prisoner patient told me it is easier to endure the life on the inside than to try to put up with the pressure of being a man, a husband, and a father in the street. The intent of racial programming had been achieved. Give up trying to be a black man. Why not be a woman? Many black males have answered unconsciously, why not?
I want to read one more thing to close us out. I would love to be on share, like read it together, because I think it's powerful and it's a great way to close out on chapter 8. Are you guys down to participate in that?
Yeah, share the screen.
Yeah, I'm just doing really fast. Page 16. 1 second. All right. So I'm gonna just start by reading right here, and then when
we can't see it yet. I don't think we see it yet.
Yeah, we don't see it.
Can you guys see it now?
Zoom in.
Yeah.
We're gonna just read the last 2 paragraphs. Should I highlight it, or is you guys gonna admit to read it without it being highlighted?
I think you're good.
All right. I have been working with black mothers of black male children, attempting to help rid them of their fear of their sons and their men dying, which pushes them unconsciously to make babies of their sons and their husbands in an effort to try to protect and defend them.
This response is the exact reverse of what is needed under the conditions of racism. Black women must learn to rear sons who will learn from the cradle that their major function as men is to not get a good job and find a car, but to defend, protect, and support their people. In that order, even should death be the consequence, the black male is not a sex machine, but a protector and developer of black people must be learned during the rearing process.
There will be good jobs and self-respect. If not, fine cars. Once the people are liberated.
There will be true self-respect, and there will be no true self-respect until that task is completed.
As a people, we will need increasingly strong men because we can expect that white males driven into homosexuality from their sense of weakness compared to the world's majority of colored men also will move towards other non-white, which is also an attempt to compensate for the awareness of true weakness. Black male bisexuality and homosexuality has been used by the white collective in its effort to survive genetically in a world dominated by colored people. And Black acceptance of the imposition does not solve the major problem of our oppression, but only further retards its ultimate solution.